Hey, this is Fay, and today we're gonna look at how magic works. You see, I asked some of my friends if there was anything they'd like me to do a video on, and they were kind enough to suggest a resource video on how magic works in Eorzea. Because while the game does have a lot of lore on it, you will really have to play through a lot of classes to get a full picture. And I thought, this is a great idea. It's a huge topic and there's lots of things to cover, but all of it is interesting. But we will probably have to break it into multiple videos. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Now, I'm not an expert, so take this with a grain of salt. But I will make sure to stay really close to the Encyclopedia Eorzea, the compilations of Merc's Menagerie, I'll link that below, and the in-game specified lore. I may forget something, and if I do, then just feel free to correct me in the comments. Also, I should probably say this, but yeah, warning, there may be spoilers ahead. I will try to keep things vague whenever I allude to something that has happened in the later game, but yeah, it might slip. Now, when I started writing the script for this thing, I wanted to dive straight into Black Mage or White Mage or any of the stereotypical flagship classes, but I think this first video should be dedicated to explaining what magic even is in Eorzea. Or well, I guess my brave attempt at doing so, because it's still pretty confuzzling, I feel. But here is me compiling it for you so that you don't have to, and I hope that you will lean back and enjoy as we chat a little bit about magic and ether. First basic principle that you likely know, but here's me telling you again. You will have to know that ether is life. If you're young and healthy, you will naturally have more of it than when you're old and ill. Ether is the lifeblood of Hydaelyn, and if somebody stops the flow of ether to a certain area, it would be, and I quote, akin to the atrophication of a limb cut off from the heart. So ether is life, it is the essence of creation. Now, as we have learned in later material of the game, there is both corporeal and incorporeal ether, but I guess for the sake of this topic, the distinction is not really so important. Most magic will likely be using corporeal ether, since it's not so much about souls or memories or ghosts or whatever, it's creating something that is in the real life, like an explosion. Just know that generally, if ether is drained from a person somehow, they will regain it by eating, by breathing, by living, and maybe even by absorbing it through the ambient ether of the world. We really don't know. But think of it a little bit like energy, something that restores itself naturally given time. So when living things die, they will release the ether that was inside of them, and this ether will be absorbed back into the world. Their soul will return to the life stream. This process is apparently quite fast, and if you ever play the Calls of Bahamut, which I really will advise you to do because it's really interesting and fun, you will see that some of the ether at the very least is absorbed very fast back into Hydaelyn. A little bit of ether will generally remain, and ether in great concentration and lingering ether can crystallize, which is why we see those formation in areas that have received impacts of great ethereal activity, or which are close to the source of all ether in Hydaelyn, that is to say the Silvertear Lake, which is where the world is closest to the ether fount of the world. After the Battle of Silvertear Lake and the Gallian battleship Agrius that fell into the Silvertear Lake and sort of broke the lid on it, we can say, in Modona some 15 years ago, it would seem that the land has generally been flooded with ether, and this allows for crystallization to become much more common in most areas, and in turn allows for the beastmen to actually be able to summon their gods much more easily because there's more crystals, there's more energy batteries out there for them to use. There are 6 different elements that can have 2 different types of charges, umbral and astral, which is a topic that is so huge that I think I'll reserve that for another video. But some elements are naturally more attuned to one aspect than another, but it is also important to remember that all elements can take both aspects. So for instance, umbral fire is very active and eruptive, whereas astral fire would be characterized by dryness, like a desert could be astrally fire aspected. But let's shelve that for later, and I will link this awesome overview that was made by Anonymous below. It's really nice and comprehensive. It is a deep topic that is interesting, but it's not super relevant for how the magic is actually cast. It merely determines how the spell might look, what aspect they're drawing on, and what the effects might be, which is another video entirely. So, how is magic cast then? Well, you've probably noticed that there are quite a few different schools of magic even inside of Eorzea, and there are many other schools outside of Eorzea. What distinguishes them is simply how do they manipulate the ether, like what way did they find that worked for them. Schools like the Thaumaturge, the Arcanist and the Red Mage, they have this philosophy, they all draw upon their own ether, they channel the ether that is already inside of them. They use the ether that they have in their body and then they just use different ways, incantations, techniques or tools to channel that ether and to shape it the way they want it to be. The schools are quite different in what tools they use to achieve this, from the circuit-like magical ink pages of the Arcanist books to channel ether, to the foci of red mages and the magically imbued stones and long-spoken chants of the thaumaturges. But the purpose is always the same, to have some way to focus the will into the shape that you need it to take. But the power that is channeled comes from the person itself and must subsequently be restored. Schools like the Conjurer, the Black Mage, and even the Astrologian, however, they draw on ambient ether of forces outside of themselves. In a way, you could say they borrow their power, and it's just a matter of who are you asking for a favor. The Conjurer is asking the elementals, the Black Mages are drawing upon the void, and the Astrologians, well, they turn to the heavens. Can everybody then use magic? I guess the short answer is no, but the longer answer more sounds like largely yes. Ether is life and life is unfair. Pure and simple, and you'll meet people for your questing that do not have a large pool of ether, that don't have a large ethereal capacity. Like this little bloke from the Thaumaturges Guild who would have to train super hard just to be able to cast a small flicker of the flame, and even then that would still be hard and dangerous for him. Some people are simply born with a greater potential for it than others, even though most could learn a bit of it given the right amount of training and motivation. A lot of the other schools of battle do seem to also use ether in their attacks for jumps or powerful hits or shields or bursts of energy or power, but this is more ether use rather than magic, or what we have come to understand as classical magic. So, if not everybody can channel magic from themselves using their own ether, can't they then just use the borrowing schools of etherology? And the thing is, Eorzea has a lot of ambient and latent ether compared to the rest of the world. You may have noticed this as you travel around the world, but it is not just the Gallians who seem a bit short of magics and mages. They are quite a bit more rare when you travel outside of Eorzea, and this is in part because Eorzea is the place where the ethereal plane and the material world kind of touches at the Silver-Tiered Lake, which means that the density of the latent ether is much higher. Now, for somebody like the pure-blooded Gallians, it is genetically impossible for them to channel their own ether. The dev team said as much at a panel, but we must really assume that they still have ether inside of them because they are they are alive, aren't they? They just can't access that ether and they can't channel it. However, they are not the only ones that have a lower population of magi. You see other areas in the east, there are magics and there are really distinct and interesting and exotic schools of magic, but the concentration of mages is lower than it is in Eorzea. And I guess the schools that draw upon external forces or from ambient ether, they aren't as readily available all over Hydaelyn as they may be in Eorzea. Plus, as we saw in the Black Mage storyline, it isn't just as simple as just borrowing something and then expect that it won't come with consequences, you know? And also, let's not forget, just because you call upon something externally does not mean that it does not drain upon your inherent ether. It costs something to dial somebody up, you know? So it could be potentially dangerous for anybody to do so who did not have a big enough ether pool to sustain that contact. In short, while it is true that a lot of people in Eorzea has the potential for casting magic, it takes deliberate training plus an innate ethereal affinity to be able to do so. And ether is life, life is unfair, and some people are simply born with a smaller capacity for storing internal ether, or for using and channeling ether. So we can't expect magic users to be as common as non-magic users simply because it takes more education and it's a matter of physical affinity that is not trainable necessarily. Oh, that was a long one, but I figured we should get these basic insights out of the way first before we dive into the specific classes and look at how magic works specifically for them. Anyway, I hope that you found this helpful, and if you have any specific job that you'd like me to start with, then just feel free to poke me. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you will have a really great day. Bye!